Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm going to start with a quick question. I just want to know, show of hands, how many of you guys know anything about Lord of the Rings? Decent amount of story? That's awesome, actually, most people, that's great. But I saw a few hands that didn't go up, so just a quick explanation of Lord of the Rings. It's a magical realm set in the world of Middle-earth, and there are several races. You have the races of men, dwarves, elves, you have talking tree ants, which are giant magical trees. And they're facing a problem in their world. Now, they're facing a problem where they have the Dark Lord who's taking over the world, and they're not able to communicate effectively. They have people who are off doing their own things. They don't see the interest in it for them. Now, the problem is that they need good communication, and that's what they have. The examples here in Lord of the Rings, as well as you can apply to your own lives. Whenever you're dealing with a conflict at work or trying to get a new business associate to get on board with something, you need to have good communication to be able to win them over. So my name is Jonathan Lyons, and here to present today about the 5 most important tips to captivate your audience.
Benelli Martinez.
Robel Zoga.
Javi Miller. Peter Lay.
And we're going to be going off with a table of contents here. We're going to have first Benelli talking to you guys a bit about a call to action. And then we're going to move on to Robel, who's going to give you a bit about how to keep it simple. Then it'll be myself. I'm going to be talking to you guys today just a bit about how to utilize powerful icons. As well, we're going to move on then to Theo. He's going to be talking to you guys a bit about movies and meetings and the differences and the importance between them. And then we're going to close out with Robbie. He's going to be telling you guys just a bit about how to be authentic to your audience. So I'm going to pass this over to Benelli now, which is going to kick you guys off with how to have a call to action.
Thank you, Jonathan. Alright, so I'm going to talk about how do you initiate a call to action. So oftentimes we find ourselves having a hard time trying to capture an audience's attention, trying to influence them with our message, whether it's a group of college students like yourselves, a group of small school children, or a group of executives. It's very hard to captivate an audience. So there is a method to hooking an audience, and that is initiating a call to action. That is going to get your audience to change something about their lives based on the message that you deliver to them. So why does initiating a call to action work? This works because we all have an ego, and no matter how small or big, we have to admit that it's there. So we are primarily concerned with our well-being, whether you're conscious of it or not. And this is powerful because if you can strike a person's ego and what they truly want, then you can craft a message based on these assumptions, and you'll be one step closer to inciting change with your message. This brings me to my next point, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So by a show of hands, how many of you have heard of the theory of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Perfect. So I'm going to give a brief overview of this concept. Maslow's hierarchy is a psychological theory that is composed of 5 hierarchical levels. So where the needs are going to be, the needs on the lower part of the pyramid are going to be need to be satisfied before achieving the upper ones. And these 5 tiers are starting from the bottom up, are physiological, such as food, water, and sleep. Safety needs, belongingness, and love needs, which would be intimate relationships and friends. And above that would be esteem needs, such as feelings of accomplishment and prestige. And lastly, at the very top is self-actualization, which is achieving your full potential. So when finding a way to make your message life-changing for an audience, you have to find what makes the audience tick. So basically, where would they lie within the pyramid of Maslow? So if you hone in on this, on their biggest need, you may just be on your way to getting them to listen like to what depends on it. So in the end, all of this just boils down to giving them a reason to care and to change. So up next, we are going to play you a short clip from The Lord of the Rings. And just as a background, this clip is going to show 2 men, and their names are Merry and Pippin. And they're basically trying to convince the magical trees to join the war effort. After this clip is finished, you will have seen a bad example of how to initiate a call to action.
What about Saruman? We come to a decision about him.
Now don't be hasty, Master Melier.
Haste? Our friends are out there. They need our help. They cannot fight this war on their own.
War, yes. It affects us all. Yes, cannot hold back the storm. We must weather such things as we have always done.
How can that be your decision?
This is not our war.
But you're part of this world. Aren't you? You must help. Please. You must do something.
You are young and brave, Master Perry. But your part in this tale is over. Go back to your home.
So let's analyze what happened in that short clip. Basically, the magical trees didn't want to join the war effort. They basically said, that's not my war, and meaning they didn't want to get involved in something that wouldn't give them any benefits. In this clip, a few things went wrong. First, Merry and Pippin did not give them an incentive to change. They didn't show them any benefits of what would be if they did act and they joined the war. And they didn't provide them with any resources, with any tools, and they basically just commanded them to join without any reason as to why. So now let's take a look at a good example. This scene is a few minutes after this previous scene that we just saw, and this is a good example of when you initiate a call to action.
Wait. Stop. Stop. Turn around. Turn around. Take a second.
South. But that will lead you past, I think. Oh. Many of these trees were my friends. Creatures I had known through night as they call.
I'm sorry, Tree.
They have voices of their own. Silence.
So what we saw here was more powerful. You could tell that there was more emotions from the trees. Their whole world was it was changing because they realized that their whole homeland had burned down. And once Merry and Pippin showed them this, they realized that they had to join and they had to take action. It showed them the danger of what would happen if they continued to sit back. And in this clip, they were finally able to tell what mattered to the magical trees, which in this case, through Maslow's lens, is safety and relationships. So how do we fix the bad example? So to fix it, you would use emotions of fear, hope, or pleasure. In this case, we would use fear of what happens if you don't act, hope of what could happen if you do win the war, and ideally, in an ideal situation, we would use fear, hope, and pleasure at the same time to create a captivating message. So Merry and Pippin needed to show them the why versus the what. They only told them what to do, but not why they were doing it. And that's why they needed to do that instead of telling them what to do. So why did it matter to them? Why should they put their livelihood at risk? This all comes full circle to creating the dilemma, using emotions, the would-be's, the would-be's, the benefits, the pros are all ways for your audience to have hunger to listen and act upon your message. So now I'll pass it off to Rebel to speak to you about keeping it simple.
Thank you, Violet. How do you make your message simple to your clients? My topic is going to be about what is the most important thing about comprehension. Anytime that professional employees wants to do research for a client, it's very important to only read out the important information leave out the relevant information. As a result, it will make it easier to explain more clearly information to the client what is important. Whenever you are ready to sell anything to a client, it's very important to make sure that you are clear with your message. How do you make your message sound simple for your clients? When I used to work as a warrant transfer at the collection agency, I would try to get the client to verify their information to make sure I'm speaking to the correct person. Anytime they would refuse to give out their information, I made my message simple and clear by telling them the specific list of instructions by cutting to the chase. Finally, after I politely convinced them to verify their information, they felt at ease because I explained it to them in a professional way. At the end, I transferred the calls to the collectors. How do you fix an overly complicated example to make your message simple to clients? As a warrant transfer, if I don't provide good examples for the purpose of the call, they would not feel comfortable giving out their information. Therefore, it was my job to make sure that I did whatever it took to solve that issue before moving forward. Even though some of the clients were not taking the calls very serious, I was still patient enough to find a solution to make my message simple to the client. How do you make your message simple if you're in an overly complicated situation? When I first got hired at the collection agency, I attended a training class which was a requirement. During that training class, everything that they were explaining was complicated. For example, when one of the supervisors were training me to become a collector, it was so hard to the point where I had to keep asking him over and over again. At the end, the message was still not clear to me. The moment my manager found out that being a collector was a challenge for me, he called me into his office and told me that he's going to switch me into the warrant transfer position because he knows that it will be easier for me. At the end, I came up with an agreement and told him that I'll take that position, and that is when I thanked him for doing me this special favor. My past experience as a warrant transfer. Once I begun as a warrant transfer, that is when my trainer made every message clear while I was being trained. After a week, it was so easy to the point where I could finally do the job on my own. Since I've been with the company for more than 4 years, they gave me the opportunity to work as a summer intern for 3 months. Once I completed my summer internship, I am proud to announce that I am now working from home as a manual dialer. My job is to call the clients and send the calls to the collectors so they can convince the clients to make their payments in a professional way. Before I pass it on to John, he's going to play a quick video about keeping your message simple.
Thank you, Mr. Robel. Now, question. Does anybody know what dwarves really look for? What are they after? What's their passion? Anybody think mining? Dwarves love to mine. Now, how does this relate to keeping it simple? Well, when you're mining, you don't exactly just find gold and diamonds just pop out of the ground and ready for you to take. It usually comes packed with a lot of rock and sediment around it, unnecessary things that just really detract from your message. So you may find a really good article somewhere, and you want to use this article, but it's got so much information that unless you're just trying to bore your audience to death, you really want to cut down on the information that's in there. So when you're mining, you typically are chipping away things. So just the same thing with that article. You need to chip away the unnecessary things. To really look for inside that rock, you're going to find the diamonds, the gems, the things that are really valuable to not only you, but your audience. And so this is when you're keeping it simple and how dwarves can find exactly what you're looking for. Now we're going to move on here to some powerful icons. Now, powerful icons, they're meaningful. You know, it has some meaning to you, and it's going to impart some kind of feeling. Now, if they're memorable, people have said things in the past, and they really stuck with you. They're icons that just really stick out in your mind. Now, they're also impactful. They're going to have an impact on your audience. Now, I'm not talking about these icons. Wrong icons. We're actually talking about these men here. These men and women who have a place in our hearts and our minds that we'll always remember and have been brought up several times. And I'm going to start off with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I know at least 2 groups of you have referenced him in your speeches, and I thought that was very interesting, and I just wanted to look at why, do a bit of analysis here. Because when you think about Dr. King Jr., you're not just thinking about just the quotes. You may use them, they're very powerful, but without his name, you're not really getting the idea of compassion, his strength through adversity, and his unity through love. These are things that come into your mind when somebody uses the name of Dr. King. As well as with Abraham Lincoln, with courage, leadership, and unity, he led our country through an extremely trying time. The country was at war with itself. People were dying. It was one of the worst wars in our history, but he kept the union together. And he has several impassioned speeches that we all still know today. As well as Albert Einstein, who represents intelligence, humor, and wit. Now, I just want to ask you guys, I'm hoping I can get an answer here. What's Albert Einstein's most famous equation? Somebody? Excellent. Well, we all know that. He's just in our minds. He's in our hearts. He's there. And so when you reference these people, you don't need a lot of backstory. You don't need a lot of information. As soon as you say their name, it makes a connection with your audience. And these are the connections that you can help do whenever you're giving your speeches. Now, sometimes you'll do some bad examples here, and we're looking at how to use it wrong. Does anybody remember back with Ivanka Trump's Chinese proverb tweet? Well, I'll read it for you here. Those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those doing it. Hyphen. Chinese proverb. Now, this is great because her father's under attack by a lot of political pressure and politics aside, you know, it could be an interesting thing to say. However, there's a problem. That's not a Chinese proverb. So whenever a lot of Chinese dissidents come on her Twitter and say, wow, Ivanka Trump knows proverbs that even the Chinese don't know, it detracts her message. In fact, it does the opposite of what you're trying to achieve. You need to be careful when you're doing these things, as well as you need to avoid using polarizing figures. Polarizing figures, I mean by that, is it'll divide your audience. You may have some of your audience that agrees with you, however, you're also going to possibly alienate the other half that is shooting daggers at you. You need to be careful of using some people consider Milo Yiannopoulos. Does anybody know who he is? It's a few people. He's a self-described provocateur. He loves to get people riled up. He likes to start a lot of contentious fights. That's how he thought, a good debate going. Debatable myself, I would not agree with that, but regardless, I would avoid using him. He will detract from your overall message. As well as using people like Michael Jackson, Bill Cosby. I mean, honestly, I love them. They have like Michael Jackson's face of generation, using his music to bring people together. Like, he had a remarkable ability to bring people together, as well as Bill Cosby. He was a part of the family. When you look at the Cosby Show, people all knew him. Black, white, Asian, we all loved him. Well, the problem with using these guys now is they had incidents come up, which you had Neverland Ranch, you had the hashtag #MeToo movement, and while they have significant contributions to art, it's sometimes a dangerous idea to consider using them based on the fact that you don't know who might be in your audience, who may have had a similar story to that. It may detract them, even for just a moment, from what your message is, and that's if it's the good side. So you want to be careful when you're using people like this, because you don't know who in your audience may have been affected by something that they were convicted of. Use of a bridge. When you're doing abridgment, just the same thing as when you're keeping it simple. You find a really good article, and you want to quote the guy. You want to quote the woman. You just want to take something from the article, but to say in its entirety would lose the message. You would lose all brevity and meaning to it. And so abridgment is very useful. However, you need to be careful when you're doing it. As with this quote here, I was a drum major for justice, peace, and righteousness. Now, this was on Dr. Martin Luther King's memorial. What does it make you think when you read that? Does it come off as slightly arrogant? It sounds like he's talking pretty highly of himself, and that's not what he did. He didn't speak of himself in that. He put people before himself. And so his family actually had to go there and demand to be changed. It cost them $700,000 to get that thing changed. So when the artist decided on this abridgment, it's a very costly mistake. You should be careful when you're abridging things because you may lose the message. You need to preserve the integrity of the author. Now, how would you fix these things? I would say with Ivanka Trump, when in doubt, just leave it out. And honestly, if you left Chinese proverb off there, it would have been perfect. No one probably would have said a thing. Of course, it would have been the typical political fight back and forth, but ignoring that, we're leaving out this class. I don't care about that. Wikiquote is not your best friend. Don't trust it. You need to go and find the actual source of the quote, see where the speech was made, where the interview was made, find out if they actually said it or not. The internet's a dangerous place. Also using non-polarizing people. I want to talk about Malcolm X and Dr. King again. Now, they had very similar things that they wanted to do. They wanted equality in the world. Now, when you're choosing non-polarizing people, we're talking about integration, civil rights, and equality. These are things that were championed by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Malcolm X went against a lot of those things. He was a fantastic speaker, and he was a very influential member of the black community. He was remarkable. However, he said some inflammatory things that got him into trouble and made it difficult for people to say that they can wholly agree with him, particularly when you consider the Nation of Islam, which is where he joined whenever he was in prison, that they were promoting black supremacy. These are things that, while it's understandable, it's difficult to say that he's not polarizing. People in your audience may be divided. So while I agree with a lot of things that Malcolm X said, it's not a good idea when you're dealing with a general audience. Now, abridgment properly, we're going to preserve the integrity of the icon. Now, if I can read that quote for you, I'm going to talk about I was a drum major for justice, peace, and righteousness. Let me read that to you in its entirety, and let me see if you get a different idea of what it's like. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. Say that I was a drum major for righteousness. And all other shallow things will not matter. It's a little different when you consider the context. And it's important to preserve those things, otherwise you may miss the point of the message. You may be destroying their original intent, and you need to preserve that if you're going to have your integrity. Now, we're going to take a bit of a break here, and we're going to play a bit of an activity. And, I was going to explain the slide here, but have you guys ever heard of Kahoot? You have? Excellent. Well, that'll make this a lot easier. Now, the goal of this is to do some pop culture names that evoke an emotional response. I want you, as we go through here, to think about some of these names. We're going to start off with some really well-known quotes, well-known people, and we're going to kind of transition back. We're going to be talking about the importance of using these powerful names that connect to you. I don't want you to think about, while we're doing this, I want you to think about how it makes you feel when you think about some of the names of these people who've made these quotes versus the names of the people you may not really know that well. I want you to think about the difference there. Now, I would like to get out your phones if you would like to. We can all participate. So if you want to get out your phones, just go to open up a web browser. Anything will work. And if you want us to Google or Yahoo or whatever your poison is, you can just Google Kahoot space it. And once you get there, we're going to have a code for you to enter. It'll be real quick and simple, and you'll also be able to enter your nickname. You'll be able to see your competition up here. So the more people we have participating in this, the better. So once you go to Kahoot, you'll be able to see a field to enter this code into. Please enter that, and then after you do that, it'll ask you to enter your name. We got some tests in a second. I'm going to probably give you guys another 20, 30 seconds just for some people who might be having difficulty. I want as many people doing this as possible. It's a lot of fun. Do some creative liberty with the names. It's totally fine. I think we're going to wrap it up here, guys. All right, so would you like to go and kick us off? Is everybody good? All right, kick us off. So we're going to play, whose quote is it? So we're going to have the quote here, and this is 1,000 points. I'm not up. Who are these people? Who is known for I Have a Dream? Oh, he's a smart guy. Excellent. Now, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Who said this? Excellent. Noise. Very nice. Excellent. Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for today. Who said this? Yes, Malcolm X, excellent.
Enrique.
Woo! Let's go! Without an open-minded mind, you can never be a great success. Who said this? Oh, it's Martha Stewart. That was Martha Stewart. Close. Close.
I knew it was Martha Stewart.
I like her. I like her.
Talking.
So what is right and what is practicable are two different things. Who said this? We're getting out there now, aren't we?
There's prizes? Can I get like a tag team?
Well, that actually, you are correct. You're 15th president, James. Dang, excellent. Good job. All right, now be less curious about people and more curious about ideas. Who said this? Adam Curie. Excellent.
Hey, good job.
All right, we got a winner here. Woo! Please stand up. Please stand up. Who's won? You. Excellent.
This is Alex, though.
Well, that was excellent. Did you guys get a sense of, as we moved on, the questions began to kind of mean less, and it kind of got a little more frustrating almost, as you're trying to place these names. When you hear these other ones, it's immediate. You really connect, and that's what I want you guys to think about when you're picking people for your projects, is to pick very well-known pop culture icons, because you want to connect, that immediate connection with your audience. You don't want people trying to guess, like, who's that guy, or what's their, I don't know, who said that. You want to just have that immediate connection, and that's what's important here. But I'm going to pass this off here. We're going to move on to Theo. He's going to talk to you guys a bit about movies and meetings.
Thank you, Jonathan. So I have a question for you. Would you prefer to attend a meeting or a movie? Movie. Thank you. Okay, so 90% of the time, people would prefer to go to a movie. Why? Because movie contains something which meetings don't. Drama, conflict, action, and resolution. So drama, it enables the viewer to identify with the story. Action, an activity tied to a greater purpose. Conflict, a challenge to invite. Resolution, overcoming what seems impossible. And when you look at the meetings column, it's kind of boring. Data, they're about sharing facts. Awards, discussions about tasks. Obstacles, a pain we avoid. And goals, measurable summaries. So why should you make meetings more like movies? It will allow you to generate engagement and interest more easily. It creates a general context. It gives possibilities for very individual interpretation. It simulates emotions and reflections. Offering an interesting problem. According to Dr. Michael Allen, the most effective way to grab a person's attention is to ask them to solve a problem. When do our senses become most acute? When are we most alive and ready to respond? It's when we're at risk, when we see an opportunity to win and the possibility of losing. Lord of the Rings, for examples, applies this approach by getting the viewer to empathize with innocent characters such as the Hobbit in truly unique survival situations. Fortunately, we don't have to rely upon novelty to make our problems interesting. We have access to stories and challenges that are immediately relevant to learners. You can ask questions about situations that they deal with in their everyday job, like what mistakes do people make, what types of restriction do we deal with, what tips and tricks would you tell someone for a new role, what is the most difficult aspect of a specific task, how do you know if you've done a good job. So start with action. Lord of the Rings didn't start by telling the audience that the world of Lord of the Rings is dangerous, or geography facts, or facts about hobbits, dwarves, elves, or even magic recipes. Instead, the films begin with Frodo finding out that he possessed the most dangerous weapon in this fictional world, and that he's being hunted down by very powerful enemies. Starting with the action doesn't mean we have to present learners with life or death choices from the very first slide. It means we get learners to the action as soon as possible. It's the power of the test then tell. You have to start with an instructive sequence, not with content, but by presenting the learner with a challenge, a specific tasks or a performance test, and then provide a feedback based on how the learners did. Details are important. Hobbits have voracious appetites, elves and dwarves hate each other since the dawn of times. Small details like this makes a fictional situation come alive. They send a message to the viewer, this is real, this is important, you have to focus. Lord of the Rings included a lot of interesting details, but passed even more. We don't learn everything there is to know about this fantasy world. You have to keep things relevant to the story. A rich and realistic context is important, but keep in mind that each extra details might add a cognitive load. And make it harder for the learner to focus on what's important. You have to find a balance. The cost of developing a complex fictional world may not be worth the boost in engagement. So to conclude, how to fix it? To improve your communication in the workplace, you have to assess yourself. Do you tend to favor information or imagination? Do you invite conflict or avoid it? When you speak, would you describe your speech as a meeting or as a movie? The next time you will speak for a presentation or a speech, try to include a movie element. Look for opportunities in everyday conversation to tell stories and practice those stories. When you watch a movie or commercial, look at the one that stood out for you. What method were used to grab your attention and reproduce those methods. Here you go, Rob.
Thank you. So what I found and what this article showed me is one of the most useful tools for having engaging communication is knowing how to be authentic, which isn't quite the same thing as being vulnerable, though they're similar, and the article definitely expresses an emphasis on vulnerability. But I would like to talk about the more constructive and positive side. So why is being authentic one of the most useful skills? So if you can be authentic, whether it be just talking to people in normal business communication or in front of an audience, it can allow people to see your own struggles. Everybody has struggles, whether it be personal or business. And it'll allow them to be able to relate to you more and be able to empathize more with what you're going to say. If your story is personal, then it adds credibility. And sometimes, in order to be authentic, you need to give a personal story. Also, if you can accomplish this mindset, it can help you overcome stage fright. There are many different ways that people try to overcome stage fright, but being comfortable with yourself, being able to show a little bit of your insecurities or the struggles that you've worked with can actually give you a better advantage when you go on stage. So in The Lord of the Rings, men are often filled with fear, passion, their own struggles, and in this world, they lack a leader who has the communication necessary to engage them, just like the other races do. So I'm going to show a clip that it depicts, for the first time, an actual leader who will come up and show his own weakness and his own insecurity and actually muster them to charge in battle for the final fight.